Hey students, today we are going to begin to learn about a strategy that will help you understand what you read and do well on the reading test. It can also be used with a variety of materials like stories, novels, textbooks, as well as tests like college entrance exams and state competency tests. When you become an adult, it'll help you read through newspaper articles, passages that the employer may give you to read about new policies and things like that. It is called the inference strategy. Notice I underlined the word infer in the inference strategy. What does infer or make an inference mean? Well, it means to figure out why someone did something. You need to make a conclusion or make a guess about something based on hints or facts you have learned. In other words, you think about what you know, and through a reasoning process, you come up with a conclusion. Now, if you take a look, you also have a Inference Strategy Lesson 1 note sheet, and we're going to be filling this out as we go. So like I said, infer means to make a conclusion or guess, I'm going to slide guess in there, about something based on hints or facts. That you have learned. Okay, so we also talked about you can use the inference strategy to do well on tests, college entrance exams, or to show what you know. Okay. So in life, that's exactly what a crime scene investigator would do. So if you've ever seen CSI, could you be able to explain what it exactly they have been doing? Well, if you think about it, they gather the evidence, they have to really think through what happened, and then they have to gather more evidence in order to figure out who exactly committed the crime and on what timeline, and if the pieces all fit together. Well, that is exactly what you're going to be doing when you use the inference strategy. You'll become sort of a reading detective. When you get a question that you have to answer about a reading passage, you will search for hints or clues and use those clues to make it your conclusion or to answer the question. As we discussed the inference strategy today, you will need to listen, answer the questions in your head, and take notes. It is an easy strategy to learn, so I'm sure that all of you will be able to master this strategy in a few short weeks. So before we talk about this strategy, let's discuss what reading is and why we read. Okay, so what really is reading? Well, it's being able to make sense out of written words. So when you read, you need to make meaning out of the printed information. You bring your knowledge, your interest, and your desire to learn to any reading situation, and that affects the meaning you create out of the words. So why would we read? Well, we could read to learn new information, we could read for fun, or we could learn how to do things. So in order to do that, though, we need to create meaning out of what we read, understand what we have read, and then store that information we get from reading in our memory somewhere in our brain. So why in the world would we want to store that in the memory banks? Well, if you are able to show your teacher what you know, your teacher will know what you have learned and what you're supposed to have learned, and then in turn, you create a relationship where I teach, you show me what you know, and then I teach some more, and eventually you are able to pass your tests with higher grades, and you're able to pass the state exams with higher grades. You're able to get out of intensive reading faster. There are a lot of times when other people are sharing what you know is useful. You could help other people by sharing what you know. You can talk about newspaper articles. You could give them accurate information from the news articles. You could read about how to fix a clock, and then 10 years down the road, pull that memory card of how to fix a clock and fix it again if it were to be broken. So it is really important to remember what we read for a lot of reasons. So besides just taking a test, you could use the inference strategy anywhere that a teacher or somebody, like your employer, could ask you a question about something they asked you to read. What are some situations where you have encountered where someone will ask you a question about something you have read? Well, you could be a part of a book club and have discussions where they're going to ask you. You could be given a pamphlet on a new policy and your employer asks you what you think about it. You could just be sitting in class and somebody who is absent says, hey, what does it mean in this text? And you could simply be able to be helpful to them. And that is exactly what you're doing when you use that strategy, the inference strategy, for a variety of the reading materials. If you aren't given specific questions, you can ask yourself a question to help you understand what you are reading. You ask more about, or we'll talk about more how to do the asking of questions in a few days. But for now, let's look at some materials and discuss which ones have questions and which ones do not. Okay, so I don't actually have the newspaper article with me, but if I were to have a newspaper article, it doesn't necessarily have questions on there that they're going to ask me about. However, somebody that I tell them about the article, they may have questions. Now, you could also receive something like this, a passage from a teacher, and it has questions at the bottom. So let's take a look at just some information in general. So other students who have learned the inference strategy have been pleased with the results that they've achieved. Let's take a look at these numbers right here. So we're just looking at right here before instruction and after instruction based on the inference strategy. So before they began using the inference strategy, these students were able to answer only 32% of comprehension questions about the passage written at their grade level. However, after they started using the strategy, they could correctly answer 83% of the questions about that grade level. So what does it tell you about the grades that they were earning before? Well, they were earning Fs before they started using the inference strategy. Now that they started using the inference strategy, they're not perfect, but they're earning a B. A B is a passing grade, and F is not. So, in addition, before they learned the strategy, they earned reading test scores at like the 3rd grade level, which is below what you guys are. And after they learned to use the strategy, on the average they earned a reading test score at the 6th grade level. So if you're going from 3rd grade to 6th grade, what could you infer about that? Well, your reading level definitely is going to go up, and you are going to be able to answer questions more on your level and not be as confused by the text. So this does show that students were better reading detectives after they learned the strategy. On average, they progressed from an F to a B on the grade test over the information they read, and they improved an average of 3 grade levels in reading. You could too. If you knew what you had improved your reading by 3 grade levels, how do you think you might feel? Well, that should make you feel very good. And it would be a great feeling to hold on to, especially if you continue to practice strategy. But in addition, you would feel more confident. You could deal with whatever reading tasks you're going to encounter in school, whether they're boring or not. So let's go to the first step of the inference strategy. And the very first step of the inference strategy is to interact with the questions and the passage. So I'm actually going to move this up so I can write this down. So the first step to the inference strategy is to interact with the questions and the passage. Okay, so what do you mean what do you think interact would mean in this case? Well, for sure you would have to think about them. Here's what you will really be doing. Let's say you have to you received a reading passage like this one that I had showed you earlier, this reading passage using cell phones, and you had to answer several questions. You would want to quickly skim over the passage. You'll read the title and see how long the passage is. For example, with regard to the passage, you'll see that the title is cell phones. And notice that it is about 3 paragraphs long. You know something about the passage. Okay? So then, you'll go to the questions, at the very bottom, and you'll read them one by one. Why do you suppose that you would read the questions before you read the passage? Well, you definitely want to be reading the questions because you'll be able to identify some of the key words in the questions so you know what clues to look for while you read. It will help you be a better reading detective if you know the question first. If there are no questions associated with the passage, you will interact with the passage differently. You will invent your own questions that will make you think and search for the answers. We will be going over how to use these kind of questions once you've mastered working with the questions that someone else gives you. So then, let's go to the second step in the infer strategy. The second step would be to note what you know. This means you are going to do 3 things, actually. Let me pull this up. Okay, so just to make sure we're on the same page, to interact with questions means to think about or work with. So let's go ahead and fill that in. About or work with the questions. Okay, so now we're going to go to the second step of the strategy is to note what you know. So we are going to note what you know. Okay, pause the video at any time if you feel behind. Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, first after you read each question, you'll need to figure out what type of question it is. There are 2 major types of question. One type of question is a factual question. There is factual. So this is a question that has an answer that can be found in the passage. It's right there where you can find it if you look carefully. The answer is a fact that the author has given you. For example, the question might ask you about how many brothers the main character has, and you could find the number of brothers in the passage. You could either find an actual number, she has 3 brothers, or you could see Mark, Tom, and Bob are her brothers, and that's 1, 2, 3 if you were to count them out. Okay, so the other one is a think and seek question. So here's just some tips. There's 2 types of questions. You have factual question, and then you have the think and seek question. Now, what does seek mean? Well, the answer to a think and seek question will not be in the passage. This is a question that requires you to think about the key words in the passage and to look for clues in the passage related to those key words to figure out the best answer. Since the answer is not in the passage, you are required to infer the best answer. So infer means that you will guess your best answer given the clues that you have found in the information you already know. And we have that right here. Again, we talked about this before, but infer means that you are going to guess the best answer based on the information you already know. Okay, so let's go back to our notes. I know it's very busy, but let's go ahead and think about these. So during the end step, you will figure out the type of question, so you're going to, during the end step, you will figure out the type of question it is and write a code letter. I will explain what those are later when we are actually doing those on the other side of this sheet. So just for now, know that you're going to write a code letter next to it. Now we talked about this. There are two major types of questions. We had talked about the first one is factual. And then we have a think and seek. Questions. So we have factual questions and think and seek questions. So the answer for a factual question is right there in the text. Remember we talked about the brothers. It could either say she has 3 brothers, or it would say that she has her brothers, Bob, Tom, Tim, are all standing next to her. And in that case, we would know that she has 3 brothers. So with the think and seek questions, you must think and look for clues. Do you remember that? Look for clues to figure out the best answer. Okay, so we filled out the first part of all your pages. Oops, I apologize. I didn't actually give you the visuals for that. So you filled out the first page of your Lesson 1 notes. Remember, we have factual and think and seek questions. The factual questions you're going to find right there in the text. And with the think and seek questions, you must think and look for clues to figure out the best answer. Okay, so let's go back to our inference strategy. Remember, we have learned that I is interact with the questions in the passage. N should be note what you know, and that is as far as we got. We just note what we know. Okay, so we've talked about factual and think and seek. We know what infer means. And this time, okay, we are going to look at the think and seek questions. So we have the think and seek questions, so we're actually going to run into 3 types of those. So we have factual or think and seek, and then there are 3 types of think and seek questions. We have the big picture questions, and you would mark that okay, let me back up a little bit. I apologize. So infer is taking on what you know. There are 3 types of questions. They're called big picture questions, predicting questions, and clarifying questions. Each one of these types of questions has a code letter associated with it. For example, the code letter for factual question would be F. Okay. So, now we're going to take a look at the factual question. We'll probably find that in our notes in a minute, but we do know that our code for that is F. That's our code. Then we have 3 think and seek questions. There are 3 types. Okay, so now let's go through our 3 type of think and seek questions and see if we can figure out what type of code we would put for those. Let me see if I can find a way so you can see some of these at the same time. Alright, that'll work for right now. Okay, so the first one of the think and seek questions is a big picture question. Big picture questions that you will mark with a B. Then you have the next type, which is predicting questions. So we're going to go ahead and fill in the blank. We have predicting questions that you will mark with a P. Notice how that's just in the beginning. And the next one, you're going to have clarifying questions. So let's go ahead and write that in there. Clarifying questions that you will mark with a C. So there are 4 types of questions altogether. They are factual, big picture, or if you are a bigger writer, you could put big and then put picture right here if you want. That'll work too. Big picture, predicting, and clarifying. Okay, the reason why we're going to go over this over and over again is because we will review, and I do want you to be able to tell me the 4 types of questions. Factual, big picture, predicting, and clarifying. Which 3 are together as a think and seek? Big picture, predicting, and clarifying. Okay, so we have those situated. So now we're going to go back to the 3rd step in the inference strategy. Remember, we interact with the questions in the passage. We note what we know. The next one is to find the clues. So the third step in the inference strategy is find the clues. Okay, so during this 4th step of the infer strategy, during the 3rd step of the inference strategy, you're going to find the clues that will help you answer the questions. So what's a clue? Well, in this case, you'll be looking for a piece of evidence that will help you answer the question. For each type of question, you will learn the type of evidence or clue to look for. As you read, you will underline all the clues that you find that relate to the question. You might even come up with a guess as to what each answer should be. Okay, so let's make sure we have that information down. So the 3rd step is to find the clues. During the step, you will look for clues. We're going to just write that word again. Just to reiterate, you are going to look for clues to help you answer the questions. Okay, so that's just interacting or looking through the passage to see if we can find those. So our next step after we find the clues is to explore any supporting details. Okay, so this means that you will look for an additional clues that will help you support your guess as to what the answer is. So what do CSI detectives do when they get an initial idea of who the criminal is? Well, they don't immediately go arrest a person. They might do an interview, they might search for more evidence, they might try to see if things line up. So when the CSI detectives have a hunch as to who the criminal is, they don't just go arrest a person. They continue to look for the clues in order to support what they think happened. They have to build a really good case. That's what you'll be doing in this step. You'll be making sure that your answer is correct by finding more evidence. You'll underline it when you find it. You'll show how to, and I'll show you how to do this in the next few steps. So the 4th step of the inference strategy, I don't know if you can see it. Ignore the last one because we're just on explore any supporting details. Oh, you can't see it. Alright, so you just have to follow me as I write. So the 4th step in the inference strategy is to explore any supporting details. Okay, so this is where you look for more details. To support your answer. Okay, so the final step in the infer strategy, you are going to return to the question. So go ahead and enter that now. Return to the question. Okay, so this means that you have to make sure that you answer the question. Unfortunately, many students work very hard to find the correct answer to the correct answer to the question, and then forget to mark the answer sheet. This helps you to remember to answer the question by doing the fifth step, return to the question. So that means that you must remember to answer the question. The mnemonic device, infer, notice I'm going to put it in all capital because each letter stands for something, represents each step of this strategy. So here you have, you're not going to be able to see all of it. Let me see if I can zoom out so you can see more of it. Okay, so the inference strategy is to interact, note, find, explore, and then return. So INFER. It's a mnemonic device, the infer, to help you to remember how to infer questions that you run into when you are working through passage. Okay, so again, what does infer mean? Well, if you remember from before, you can use the word to help you to use the clues to help you answer questions about what you read. The letter in this word is to help you remember the 5 steps of the strategy. Anytime you need to think about the 5 steps, think infer. You're reading, so you need to infer, and you'll be able to quickly think of the steps. Alright, so let's review what we know about the inference strategy so far. So, we know that on the inference strategy, we need to interact with the question and the passage. Note what we know, find the clues, explore any supporting details, return to the question. Now, I'm going to run into 2 types of question. I'm going to have a factual question or a think and seek question. When I have a think and seek question, it's possible that I'm going to run into 3 different types. Big picture, predicting, and clarifying. Those are my 3 types of questions. You need to review this information several times because at the end of this video, you can come to me, and if you can tell me the steps and the types of questions and show that all of your notes are completed, then when we do our meeting, there's possibility there will be a piece of candy in it for you just for listening to the video all the way through. Alright, so let me summarize real quick. Today, we've begun to learn about the inference strategy. It consists of 5 steps that we can remember by using the mnemonic device infer. That's all there is to it. You apply the infer to the questions related to the passage. Now, in the next lesson, we will think about factual questions and how to answer them. You will also practice answering them on your own. Alright, so come see me and you can get the piece of candy.